Hi everyone. So I've been asked to share a little bit about myself, my life, and my story, and how I came to be, how I came to be me, and how I became sober. So I'm a little nervous. I don't do this every day, but where do I begin? So start with where I grew up. So I grew up in Manitoba, Canada, a small little town in Manitoba. My parents were both young parents, and they were not very wealthy, so I kind of grew up poor. My dad did the very best he could. My mom was and is mentally ill. She suffers from schizophrenia. She's been that way her whole life, basically, at least since I've known her. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand why she was like that, why she did the kind of things she did, but it wasn't any real fault of her own. Her schizophrenia was just kind of one of those things that if you're not taking your medication, it can take over your entire mind and can make you into a different person. So she didn't have the tools to raise children. So I didn't really get much of a relationship with my mother. My dad was a drinker when I was a kid. He used to go across the street and party on the weekends, and then, their son would come over and babysit us, that kind of thing. And I seen it pretty much every weekend, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. And he still paid his bills. He still went to work every day. He knew he had to raise kids, and he did the best he could at that time. Fast forward, when him and my mom finally separated and my dad left, he had enough. He tried to get her help, and she just obviously wouldn't go for it. So he left, took us, and we lived in multiple different towns, places. We lived all over Manitoba and then eventually in Ontario. But besides the point, I guess I grew up in an alcoholic home. My mom drank too. I don't remember it because I think she went out and drank and then she'd come home and sleep all day. My dad drank on the weekends and I would see him once in a while, but after they split up, I saw more of it. My dad was depressed. He was coming home every night. He was getting drunk by himself and then going to work the next day. I always felt bad for him. He was trying to do his very best, but he couldn't. And he obviously didn't have, again, the tools to, do what he needed to do, I guess. So then, of course, I rebelled, and I was a child at the time. So I was about 8, 9 years old, I believe. And they sent me to my aunt and uncle's and thought that they could get me out of my rebellious stage, because I was a very angry child, even at that time. And I didn't understand. I came back to my dad with a brand new girlfriend. He had other girlfriends, and they were fine. They were not terrible people at all, actually. But this one, she really ate the cake. So growing up as a child, I always had a good supportive family on my dad's side. My mom's side, some of them were very supportive. However, the part that's hard is going through this. My dad's girlfriend was very, very mean. She was abusive. She was twisted in her mind. She specifically didn't like me. I have three siblings, one sister, 2 brothers, all younger than me. So they were all living with me. She had 2 kids of her own. But they were her and her son and her daughter were not nice. She belittled me. She called me down all the time. She put me in corners for hours on end while other people would walk by and hit me. She'd force my brothers and sisters to fight each other and myself. My dad let her do it, and for the longest time. And I think he was, deep down, I know he was scared of her. She beat on him too. I'm sure. I know for a few times, and it continued. So my whole childhood was about being tortured, and I mean tortured. She made me do things I can't even still speak about. So after I left, what happened was I was about 12 years old. I ran away from home, and I saved all my money. I saved my clothes and my shoes, not my money. I had no money. And I just escaped. I was living in Ontario at the time, and I literally escaped out of the house while everyone was sleeping to try and save myself and hopefully save my brother, my sister, my brothers. When I left, it was the scariest thing I ever did. I ran so fast, so hard. The bruises that were on my body, really, they were everywhere. They were limiting me, but I didn't care. I was in pain. I just needed to get home, and I needed to go back to Manitoba, go back to my aunt and uncles, and tell them what was going on. So anyway, I did escape. I did end up in a group home for a night in Toronto. Some very fortunate people saved me that day, and I'm forever grateful for those people. And then after that, I lived with my aunt and uncle for a year, but I was a very angry child, and they didn't understand that, and nor should they have, because who could? And they basically got me into a foster home in this other town where I attended high school for the rest of my high school year, for the rest of the next 4 years. So eventually my sister ended up living with me. Took a good year before they got taken out of the home, but they did. A lot of fighting. My brothers went to my aunt and uncle's, and by the grace of God, they raised them as their own. And yeah, after that, I graduated, and reluctantly, and I was very happy about that. I was in a relationship at the time that was probably not the best, and that's when my drinking started. And I thought it was cool in high school. I remember drinking behind a youth center, getting caught by the cops, crossing a border illegally because the guys thought it'd be fun to drive through some cornfields and then end up in the States, driving through some fields and ending up in the States for no apparent reason, ending up, in a jail cell. I was 16 at the time, right? I knew my life was going in a weird direction. I did try to slow it down a little bit and stopped hanging out with those people, graduated. But then my relationships that I continued to go into with other men just seemed to make things so much worse for me. So my relationships got worse. I got worse. I didn't touch any drugs until I was 23. That's when I experimented with cocaine. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, this is stupid. This not going to do anything for me. Why am I doing this? So then about 6 months, I didn't do it again until, maybe I think it was New Year's. And I was living with this guy, and I had moved across province. I left Manitoba. I was in BC, lived there in this city, and lived with him. And he was a blackout drunk, 3-day bender, 4-day bender kind of drinker. And I lived with him for 6 years, just about. And it took me until I realized that I wanted better, and I didn't want to go through that anymore. I didn't want to deal with the emotional abuse that I was getting from him. And I wasn't perfect either. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but I was high all the time. I was drinking. It spiraled. I went from once every weekend to doing cocaine and drinking to next thing you know, that's all I could think about was just, when am I going to do cocaine again? And 3-4 days in, didn't matter how shitty my hangover was, and it was bad. The lows when you come down from drugs are immense, but I came down, and then I would do it again and again. And then I decided that I was going to go to school, and I was going to get my healthcare aides certificate and become a healthcare aide. My friend convinced me, actually, and bless her heart, she got me through that. But let me tell you, I was not in any place to be doing anything of that nature. I should have gone to rehab at that time. I was promiscuous. I'd been single for the first time. I was 25, going 26 years old. Been in a relationship my entire 20s, So I was promiscuous, I was sleeping with everyone, I was doing anything and everything, and I didn't give a shit who I hurt, who I offended. I didn't care who I used. I was just ready to just take on the life of a fucking partier and just live that way, pardon my French. And yeah, it wasn't until I met my husband, and then I told him what I was doing in my life and where I was going, and I changed. And it got better. I told him that I was into cocaine, and I told him, I said, you don't have to stay with me. And I understand that because I'm trying to get my life together. And he took, I don't know, he fell in love with me and I fell in love with him. And so then I stopped doing the drugs, but, we were still drinking like my dad did, drinking on the weekends, partying. Mostly just the two of us eventually, because then, there were times where I woke up with no clothes on and I had no idea where I was. I woke up on the floor, on the ground. Not any idea how I got there. Woke up at other people's houses, blacked out constantly, always blacking out. I'd literally turned into my ex-boyfriend. And it was getting to be more and more and more frequent, to the point where like every time I drank, I never knew what I was doing, or I never remembered the night before, ever. So it was like, I was just doing it to do it. And my husband started drinking too. So of course, you live with a sick person, you become a sick person. And so he was drinking too. And then next thing you know, we're like borrowing money and we're trying to, and getting loans, and all because of alcohol, just to feed our addiction. And one day we were sitting at the table and back in February, and we realized that this isn't working for us anymore. And this is mundane and redundant and stupid. What the fuck are we doing? And so we stopped. And we both said this isn't going to be easy. And it's not like it was the first time that we tried to quit. No. But it was the first time that we realized that this life is going to break us. And we do love each other. We always have. But we knew that if we didn't get sober, our relationship would be over. Now, mind you, we also, not that this is an excuse by any means, it's not, but, in the first 2 years of our marriage, we experienced losing both of our dads. My dad died of cancer, and I'm sure alcohol had a lot to do with that. His dad, same thing, alcoholism, had a heart attack in his house, all within a year. And I was just starting to compete, and I did my first show, got third place. My dad died 2 weeks later, and then things got worse. And then we moved away, and we moved back to moved to Manitoba, moved back to BC. Realized that was a bad decision, and my family got a taste of what our life was like. I'm sure they were not impressed. And then so we figured it out, but it took a long time. My husband and I have been married 5 years at the end of this month, and we'll be sober 6 months at the end of this month as well, on the 21st, I believe it is. So a lot of great milestones, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I have always struggled with being happy with me, myself, and now I'm finally happy again. And I can't even say again, I don't know what it's like to be truly, truly happy with myself. And that's the biggest lesson I'm learning about my sobriety, is that I needed to be happy for me, and I needed to feel good about myself. And I know that other people are seeing that too, and they're inspired by it, and it's wonderful, and I'm grateful. I've had so many amazing opportunities and blessings come my way since I got sober, and my husband as well, and it's just mind-blowing. Wish I would have started sooner, but here we are. And I just recently did my very first competition. Of all the preps for competitions, bodybuilding competitions I've tried to do, that was the one thing I could never stay sober during any of them. I was still drinking. And this past July, I did my first competition sober, completely, the whole prep. So that's what I took out of that. And I got second place. First national show, and I got second. So if that doesn't tell someone that sobriety isn't a beautiful, wonderful gift, I don't know what is. I don't want to be right then, because that to me is just the most powerful thing in the world. And to know that you are capable of so much if you truly put your mind to it. It's never going to be a walk in the park all the time. You have to do life on life's terms. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to be unhappy sometimes. You're going to be sad. You're going to cry. But I'll promise you this, if there's any words of advice I could give to someone who's still struggling with sobriety, is that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but the rewards at the end and leading up are 1000% worth it. So that's my story.